Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why explaining abstract ideas like freedom or justice feels so much harder than talking about a table or a chair? Well, this new study dives deep into that very puzzle. What if I told you that how we talk the talk about the big ideas versus everyday things shows up in our bodies and how we move? Scientists have been curious about why abstract concepts are so tricky for us to learn and explain. Usually, studies look at how just one person learns words, but real life, especially learning from your parents, is way more interactive, so a team of researchers decided to watch families in action. They wanted to see how parents explain abstract words versus concrete words to their kids, and what was going on with their bodies while they did it. Here is how they set up this fascinating experiment. They invited families with a mom, a dad, and a 5-year-old kid to their lab. Now, 5-year-olds are at a really interesting age. Before they usually get a big boost in understanding abstract ideas, they gave the parents different words. Some concrete like table and some abstract like freedom. The parents had to explain these words to their child. Sometimes one parent would do it, sometimes both parents together, and sometimes the whole family would draw or tell a story based on the word. They recorded all of this, not just what people said but what their bodies were doing too. This is where it gets really cool. They looked at a bunch of things families do when they're talking and explaining. They analyzed gestures, those hand movements we all make. They also looked at head movements like nodding or tilting your head, and they even watched for social touch like a gentle pat on the arm. They developed a detailed way to code all these actions, categorizing them into different types to see if there were patterns. So what did they find? The first big thing was about gestures. People, especially the parents, made way more hand gestures when they were talking about abstract concepts compared to concrete ones. That tells us that when things are harder to explain, we tend to use our hands more to help get the message across. And it wasn't just any gestures. They noticed that when talking about concrete things like, let's pretend this is a table, people would make gestures that look like the actual object, called iconic gestures. Think of pretending to hold a cup or showing the shape of something. But when they were explaining abstract ideas, they used fewer of these iconic gestures. Instead, for abstract concepts like freedom, they use more metaphorical gestures. These are gestures that try to represent an idea in a spatial way, perhaps showing something opening up or flowing. It is like they're trying to create a physical feeling or image for something that doesn't have a clear physical form. This suggests we use our bodies to try and make abstract ideas more concrete, either by showing what they look like or by describing them in a more physical, metaphorical way. What about head movements and social touch? Interestingly, these didn't show as clear a pattern, while there were some slight tendencies like more head movements overall with abstract concepts. The differences weren't statistically strong enough to be certain. It seems gestures were the main bodily signal that changed a lot, depending on whether the concept was abstract or concrete. Now, here's a really interesting part about how families move together. They used fancy technology to track how the family members' movements synchronized. And guess what? When families were talking about abstract concepts, their movements, like their head wiggles and body shifts, were more in sync for longer periods. It is like they lock into a shared rhythm for a longer time when they're trying to sort out tricky abstract ideas. This means that for abstract concepts, the parents and child stayed more synchronized for longer stretches of time. Think of it as being more in tune with each other for a sustained period. When tackling the harder ideas, this longer synchronization might be because they're really trying to focus and understand together, needing that extra connection. So, what does all of this mean? It tells us that learning and explaining abstract concepts isn't just a mental process. It has really tangible, embodied markers. We use different gestures, and we move more in sync with others when we're navigating these more complex ideas. It seems we really lean on our bodies and our shared presence to make sense of the world of abstract thoughts. The study suggests that when we encounter abstract concepts, we tend to lean more on communication and collaboration to find common ground. This study is pretty amazing because it looks at real family interactions, which is much more natural than lab-based tasks with strangers. It shows that our bodies are actively involved in how we understand and teach difficult ideas. The fact that families are using these multimodal signals, meaning they're using words, gestures, and synchronized movements together, highlights how important social connection is for learning. When it comes to abstract concepts, it really does seem like we need each other more. We use gestures to try and paint a picture of these hard-to-grasp ideas, and we synchronize our movements to stay connected and focused on understanding together. It is like our bodies are saying, "This is tough, let's stick together and figure it out." This study offers a powerful insight. The way we learn and teach abstract ideas is deeply embodied. It is not just about the words, but about the movements, the gestures, and the shared rhythm of interaction. This is super important because it reminds us that learning is a full-body experience, especially when it comes to the big, abstract concepts that shape how we understand the world and each other. Of course, like any study, this one has its limits. They looked at only 5-year-olds, so we don't know if these patterns change as kids get older. Also, they use a specific set of abstract and concrete words, and maybe other words would show different results. But the big takeaway is that our bodies are incredibly active players in how we learn and communicate. Especially when it comes to those complex, abstract ideas. It makes you wonder. Next time you are explaining something tricky, what will your body be saying? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you find yourself gesturing more when explaining abstract ideas? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this dive into the science of our minds and bodies. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating research discoveries. Thanks for watching.